We want to move on right now and talk about monetary policy. Very basically, monetary policy, a definition of monetary policy is changes in the money supplies. And again, money supply is M1, cash and demand deposits. Changes in the money supply in order to achieve full employment, full production. And the Fed does that. The Fed, remember, the primary function of the Fed is to control the money supply. They do that one of three ways, or a combination of all three. They will change the reserve ratio. We talked about that when we talked about transaction 4 a few videos ago. It will change the discount rate. The discount rate is the interest rate that the Fed will charge member banks. The interest rate that the Fed will charge member banks, it is an overnight interest rate because the member bank, violated the reserve requirement ratio. In other words, they lent more money out than they should have. In one of the earlier transactions, I said we could not have lent any more out or we would have been in violation. Sometimes it happens. And in that case, there's a lot of different ways that the bank can get in order to have that reserve requirement. One of the ways is called the discount rate, where the bank would literally go to what we call the Fed's discount window and ask for an overnight loan. That overnight loan is the discount rate. And the third way, and the more important way, and one that we're seeing right now as we speak in our economic times, is the buying and the selling of U.S. securities. That is what we also call open market operations. And this is the function of the Federal Open Market Committee, which we talked about, called the FOMC. Now, let's see what happens when we change the reserve ratio. When we if we increase the reserve ratio, we decrease the money supply. We saw that earlier when in one of the early videos where we had, let's say, a template of 20% for reserve ratio, and we raised it to 50, and instead of the money supply increasing, the money supply decreasing. The rationale behind that is because instead of a bank having to withhold 20 cents of every dollar, now it has to hold 50 cents. So the amount of excess reserves goes down, and therefore the money supply goes down. If you lower the reserve ratio from, let's say, 20% to 10%, you're actually increasing the excess reserves and therefore increasing the money supply. Change the discount the discount rate. And again, the discount rate is the interest rate that the Fed charges member banks for being in violation of the reserve ratio. Let us assume for a moment that if a member bank is in violation, that the Fed is going to charge them 5% as a penalty for an overnight loan. In other words, the Fed's going to lend them $50,000 because that's the extra amount that they lent out that they should. And they're going to charge them this 5%. Let us assume for a moment that the Fed comes in and says, okay, what's going to happen now is we're going to charge 7%. Perhaps we are experiencing inflation and we want to stop the banks from lending. So therefore, the Fed will raise the discount window, the discount rate, or increase the discount rate from 5 to 7%. Now it's more costly for you to borrow money. Not only that, but you might impose a personal tax. In other words, another amount so that no one will go beyond the actual reserve requirement. And therefore, when this happens, this lowers the amount of excess reserves that you have available because you don't want to be subject to that extra 2% and therefore lower the money supply. And subsequent to that, if it's lowered to, let's say, 1%, well, now it's advantageous for me to, in effect, go ahead and do that. It's only a penny on every dollar. Therefore, the amount of excess reserves, just tell the bank presidents, lend it all out. At a penny, we can make more money, and therefore we will increase the money supply. We're going to purchase an open market, sell or purchase securities. And this first one is an open market purchase. With an open market purchase, you're going to go to the public. and you're going to ask the public to sell, you're going to buy from the public, an open market purchase. I'm going to buy bonds from you. I'm going to buy a U.S. security from you. So therefore, what happens is this. Before you give me the $10,000 security, I have to give you a check. And what happens is when that happens, you're going to put that check into your checking account, which increases demand deposits, subsequently increases excess reserves, subsequently increases the money supply. Right? An open market sale, I'm going to sell you a security. Well, in this situation, what happens is that before I give you the security that I have, the bank has, you have to give me $10,000. So once you give me $10,000, you give me a check for $10,000. Therefore, your demand deposits go down, or the demand deposits in the bank goes down. The excess reserves go down, and therefore the money supply goes down. So therefore, these are the three tools that the Fed uses to control the money supply. And in doing that, if the Fed increases the money supply, or in fact lowers the reserve ratio, lowers the discount rate, subsequently increasing this, or does an open market purchase, the money supply will move to the right, M1 to M1 prime. Interest rates go down. I'm going to say RL here. And now people are much more willing to borrow money in order to spend money. And we're seeing this now. In 2011, this is what the Fed has been doing. The Fed went out a couple of months ago in May and purchased securities from people in order to give them money in order to spend. Subsequently, if we are in an inflationary system, what will happen is that they will decrease the reserve ratio. Increase the reserve ratio. They will increase the discount rate, or they will do an open market sale. And in this case, the money supply will move to the left, causing interest rates to go up, and therefore it will discourage you from borrowing money and therefore spending. So if the money supply decreases, we are trying to control inflation. If the money supply increases, we are trying to stimulate the economy. Again, if you have any other questions, please feel free to place them on discussion board. We'll take care of them. Have a good day.